everybody, and welcome to Hands On. I'm still admitting some people into the session. So my name is Alana, and I work at the Innovation Cluster. For those of you that aren't familiar with the Innovation Cluster, we are a not-for-profit organization that supports startups working in innovation and technology. We do so by offering advisory services, access to partners, and workshops such as this one. So we encourage you to apply if you have an innovative idea or a startup working in technology, and you can do that by going to our brand new website. It's at www.innovationcluster.ca. So again, welcome to Hands On Setting Your Business Goals for 2023. So today you're going to be hearing from Ryan Smith. He is the coaching associate and practice leader at Zavino Human Resource Partners. So he has a number of learning objectives today, which are going to include understanding how your personality affects the process of goal setting, learning your individual strengths and challenges for goal setting, debunking common myths about goal setting, learning to harness your environment and habits to follow through on goals, and equipping you with practical goal setting tools and strategies. So I know that Ryan has a bit to cover today, so I'm going to pass it right over to him now.
Okay, great. Thanks, Lana, and good afternoon, everyone. Thanks so much for tuning in today. I've seen a few familiar names and faces already, so it's good to have you guys on the workshop today. And as Lana said, my name's Ryan. I'm the coaching associate and practice leader at SHRP. And today I'm talking about goal setting. Of course, it's that time of the year where everyone's starting to think about their goals, whether it be your business goals, what's our strategy going to be next year? What kinds of priorities do we need to check off the box to stay competitive and grow? Or even on a personal level, maybe you want to get in the gym, maybe you finally want to write that book that's been on your mind. Whatever it is, we start thinking about goals a lot during this time, don't we? There's something about the month of December and the new year coming that we're in refresh mode. We're thinking about new and exciting things, which is always really interesting. The first time I didn't deliver this exact workshop, but I delivered a workshop on goal setting years ago for the first time with Innovation Cluster. And there was a little joke at the beginning because we delivered it around 3 weeks into January. Does anyone know, and you can put it in the chat, why that's significant? Why that 3 weeks in January is a very significant time when it comes to goal setting? We'll see if anyone's able to answer in the chat here. Exactly. Matt for the win right there. That's about where most people quit on their New Year's resolutions, about 3 weeks in. So that's very interesting. And I'll show you some stats coming up that kind of support that show why most of us struggle with goal setting and why I believe maybe many of you are on this workshop to begin with. We got a pretty good turnout. So to give you some more context on myself, though, before I go any further into this workshop, I'm the coaching associate and practice leader. I look after all of our leadership and communication and teamwork-based programs and services at SHRP. And Alana can attest to this. I say at every workshop, I'm passionate about helping people reach the fullness of their potential. And I mean that. And of course, one of the big areas that is important for that is being able to set and follow through on your goals. And when you have that working for you, it's the difference between what I would call living intentionally versus living reactively. And it's such an amazing skill set because in today's day and age, whether it be just on a personal level or especially in a business and organizational context, we have so many distractions and obligations pulling on our attention and energy every which way. So it's an amazing skill set and a huge competitive advantage for leaders and organizations when you're able to intentionally plot a course towards somewhere and follow that through despite the storms of life. And so, like I said, many of us, though, are not really good at setting goals, and you probably didn't need me to tell you that. But in a minute, I'll show you some more stats that illustrate what I'm talking about. But let me jumpstart or kind of piggyback off that point to talk about the title here, what I call moving your goalposts, a personalized process for goal setting. What do I mean by that? Well, sticking on that point that many of us are not good at goal setting, what I've witnessed, and you've probably seen as well, is that today, especially in organizational context, but even personally, if you scroll through your Instagram, we are obsessed with goals. We are obsessed with our 1, 2, 3, 5, 10-year goals. There's so much material and literature out there about setting goals. So we have the resources there, the training is out there, the opportunities are out there. Why is it still that many of us really struggle in this area? And in many years that I've worked with leaders, I've witnessed that we have a set of beliefs that are not serving us very well when it comes to setting goals, especially a bit of a cookie cutter, one size fits all approach as it comes to setting goals, which doesn't really reflect real life because, as you know, all of us are so different. We have different personalities, we have different cultures, experiences, strengths, weaknesses, experiences in life that shape how we're able to follow through on goals. So it only makes sense that we would have a more personalized, flexible process when it comes to being able to effectively set and follow through on a goal. But often what we typically see is this approach that if the goalposts are this far down the field, so to speak, that if you're not achieving your goals, you just got to try harder, right? You just got to discipline, the hustle, the grind, right? We just got to hype ourselves up enough and work hard enough, then we'll achieve our goals, push harder, faster, farther. But whoever said the rules had to be that way? What I'm hoping today is to show you a more personalized process so that you learn to adjust the goalposts, to move those goalposts rather than thinking that that's where they are, that's where they're going to stay. How do I adjust it in a way that fits the natural flow of who I am and what I'm good at, what I'm not good at, in a way that's more deeply fulfilling and also works with your strengths and who you are? So my goal today, no pun intended there, is to show you a more personalized process and to hopefully debunk some myths and give you some tips and insights that you maybe haven't heard before. That was a big thing on my heart today, is not to just give you some of the common tools and strategies, but to intentionally give you some things that you probably haven't heard before when it comes to setting goals. So with that said, let's dive in, shall we? First thing I'd like to know from all of you, and you can put this in the chat, is what are some things that stop you from following through on your goals? Let's see here what people put. Time, absolutely, that's a big one. Just don't got the time. Anyone else? Squirreling, yeah. The chaos of life, there it comes. Planning, cost, absolutely. Busyness, yep. Let's hear a few more. Let's see what we got. Yep, there's another one for cost. A lot of you trending in the same kind of direction, all of the above. There we go, right? So there's so many things that pull on our attention, our goals, are, that make it difficult to follow through. The will to endure, that's a good one, absolutely. So today I want to address a lot of those things, especially as it comes to how do we, once again, create a personalized process? How do we reframe things? Because chances are at some point, whether we set a goal, there's always going to be some sort of sacrifice that needs to happen. There's always going to be, it probably will never be the right time. There'll probably always be financial reasons why not to for certain things, but that's where I want to hopefully help us start to reframe situations and once again create a personalized process that works with us rather than trying to make it look like someone else's journey. But let's talk a little more about the environment when it comes to setting goals. And these are some of the stats that I mentioned earlier. What we can see is that 83% of people just don't have goals in general. Then 14% have plans, but not in writing. And 3% have written goals. And I should also mention that a lot of the stats I'm putting up are based mostly on North American studies. So take it with a grain of salt, how you will. Nonetheless, I just want to give a general kind of picture, right? And most of you probably didn't need those stats. You know that fairly well. But you know, all this adds up to only 6% of people actually achieving their goals. Now, that's probably not a great way to start a workshop on goals. It's like, Ryan, what are you trying to achieve here? But I just wanted to survey the environment and show you where most people lie. However, there is hope. Right away, to start the workshop today, that would be more than the price of admission, so to speak. I want to show you a couple things here. Is that you are 42% more likely to achieve your goals if you write them down. And you are 40% more likely to achieve your goals with active steps, action steps that you break it up to, and regular accountability. So right off the bat, If you have a goal today, if you have something you want to achieve, if you write it down, if you break it up into some smaller action steps, and if you have one person you trust who you share it with and have some sort of regular accountability, whether that be every week, every month, you're sharing it with them and they're really holding you accountable, you are well above most people when it comes to that journey of your goals and setting a good foundation. We'll come back to this later. But speaking of foundation, let's look at how you start a goal, how you set a good starting point that's going to create some momentum moving forward, which might sound a little strange because most of us, we don't really think of how to start a goal. We think about the process of staying aligned and staying disciplined. How do I stay motivated to chase it? And of course, we love looking at the outcome or the reward at the end that we want. But most of the time, we don't think about how we started. It might seem counterintuitive. Well, Ryan, don't I just decide something I want? And maybe then I create some measurables, maybe break it down into some action steps. Yes, that's good, but there's actually so much more to that. And often what we see in most endeavors of life, and what I've witnessed with a lot of leaders, is that 90% of your success lies in the first 10% of work and how well you do that. And that first 10% of the task is usually what your brain is resisting the most when you want to start something. Usually what happens that we see is when you're able to engage in that first 10% of work, that's when motivation comes a lot more easily and where you get excited about doing more. But usually it's in those first initial steps that we experience the most inner resistance and the most, our brain is rehearsing all the reasons not to. Maybe our body is telling us this doesn't feel good. I don't like pushing through for this. But if we get really good at setting a good starting point, a good foundation, it's not going to guarantee success, but it's going to really help you in creating some good momentum. Another way to think about it is the picture there is that with Olympic sprinters, if they're running the 100-meter, it's so important that starting position, having an effective starting position and becoming really good at exploding out of that position. If you do it well, it could be the difference between breaking a world record or not even making the podium. Of course, goals are more a marathon than a sprint, but in this case, I found the metaphor appropriate. So let's talk about setting a good foundation right from the get-go. So I bet you didn't expect to see a philosophy quote in a workshop like this. He who has a why to live for can bear almost any how. What do I mean by that? Where am I getting with that? Well, it's the difference between understanding the what and how versus the who and why of your goal. Another way I would voice this often or verbalize this when working with teams is what I call the transactional and relational space. Is that the transactional space is the what we do, the how we do it, our policies, our procedures, KPIs, all those sorts of things in an organization that we have. Where the who and the why, the relational space, that would be our company values, the quality of relationships that we share, the culture we have built. Both are very important and crucial for a thriving organization. However, most organizations lie heavily towards the transactional side, so much so that it kills the people. And we see these two spaces as competing with one another. It's like I can't give more to one without taking away from the other. But I'd like to suggest to you that doesn't need to be the case. So that's thinking about it from an organizational standpoint. But what about personally? How does this relate to setting goals? Is that often we get so carried away with the what and how. What do I want? How am I going to achieve that? What are all the practical steps I need to do that we forget the who and the why, or we never even give time to consider it to begin with. And most of the time, if you think back on your own life, and especially a goal you set that you did not follow through on, or a goal that you just never got started to begin with, most of the time, I would bet you that it probably, that resistance or that difficulty had more to do with the who and the why, in the sense that it probably never stopped being a good goal. If you say, well, I want to get in the gym and lose weight, a lot of people don't do that. Well, that's always been a good idea, getting in shape, getting healthy, right? It's not that practically that stopped being a good idea. And it's also not that practically you didn't have access to a lot of good methods and resources and material to learn how to do that. Most of the time, it's the who and the why. It's having a deep inner why and a strong one that resonates with your values, where you understand the cost or the opportunity cost of doing this or not doing this. And especially the who am I doing this for? The deepest reservation of motivation in your motivation tanks that you will have is when people are counting on you, or that goal has something to do with a deep inner value of yours. Now, you might not always be able to connect it to something like that, but I'd like to encourage all of you that if you have a goal that's really important that you want to follow through on, you've been having difficulty with, this might be a good exercise to do just in your journal, or just in a time of kind of meditating, thinking about, okay, what really is my who and why? You could even break it up into a personal mission, vision, value statement if you want. You don't have to do that. But doing some sort of internal exercise like that to really consider what, the who is this impacting beyond just myself? Who's counting on me? Who's going to be better off for me doing this? And the why, like, why do I really want to do this? Like, what is the cost of not doing this? What are the benefits in 1, 2, 3, 5 years of me doing this? How could my life be so much different years down the road if I'm able to successfully do this and have a really powerful why? And like I said, mission, vision, value statement, or even one sentence for each. And this can be a really powerful motivator, really powerful inspiration for you when you're facing the difficult days and feel like, I just don't want to do this anymore, right? Or, it's too hard. Really have a powerful who and why. Next thing for helping you create a strong starting point is assessing your personal readiness for change. How ready are you to change in your life? And a simple way I break it down is this, is if you look at the perceived pros and cons of the decision or what you want to follow through on, and keyword perceived, what we'll see here is that I break it down personally in a few steps. The first is if you're thinking about that goal and in your brain, the perceived cons outweigh the pros, the best you'll be able to get to is a place of desire. Like, yeah, I want to do that, but it's wishful thinking. The next thing is if the perceived pros equal or are at least close to the perceived cons, then you're starting to access the area of belief of, okay, I think I might be able to do this. I think, like, I'm starting to believe this is a good idea. I can do this. However, you might still struggle if you're only in that area. The next is if the perceived pros outweigh the cons, that's when you start to kick into action. Now, how does this relate practically? It's like, Ryan, I get it. How does this relate practically? So once again, because fitness and health metaphors are just really appropriate and easy to illustrate for goals, let's say you wanted to get in shape. Let's say you spend most of your evenings in front of Netflix with a tub of Ben & Jerry's, right? And you want to get in the gym, you want to really change that lifestyle. Well, if you're really struggling, right? And it's like, oh, I just don't want to do this. You might think maybe I'm not disciplined enough. Maybe I'm not motivated enough. I'd like to suggest to you that's not the case. It's just internally, there might be some messaging going on that you don't realize is happening. Sometimes it happens on a subconscious level. The I don't feel motivated, I don't want to do this. What it really could be is your brain thinking about what's the cost of a gym membership? How long does it take me every day to drive to and from the gym? What fun things am I going to miss out on? Oh, I got to take an hour every couple days. I won't get time with friends. I won't get to do this. Your brain is putting all those calculations. It is happening in seconds. And you might not realize that they're happening until you take time to intentionally get them out there and understand, what do I think the pros and cons are of this? Great practical exercise. Once again, write it down. Think about that goal you have and just do a brain dump. What is all the pros of this goal? What are all the things that could help me, one that I'll be able to achieve, the benefits, what is going for me? And what are the obstacles? What are the setbacks? What is the cost of this? What are the cons? If you do that and that list, the list of cons significantly outweighs the pros, then you need to think about realistically, practically, is this a good decision? But also challenge those cons, reframe them. Is there another way for me to think of these? Is there, take time to think about that. Yeah, I see some cons here. Going back to our example, it's like, well, maybe the gym isn't that expensive. Maybe if I have eat out like once or twice less a month, then it's not so hard to manage, right? Maybe that time I'll miss out on, it's like, what kinds of activities will I be able to do once I get in shape? Or how much more energy am I going to have? How much more productive at work am I going to be, where this will open up other areas of my life? As you do that, then all of a sudden that list might start to shift. And then all of a sudden you're reconceptualizing, you're reframing those ideas in your brain to better access the motivation centers, where all of a sudden that list of pros is much larger than the cons. And then if you're looking at that every day, that's going to significantly help you, because you're constantly reminding yourself of the reward that's happening from this work. And then here's the kicker: as you start the goal, this process might repeat. You started off well, and then you hit a challenge along the way in the goal. Where am I at now? Did I drop down a few rungs on my change readiness? How do I reframe that once again to get the list back to a more belief or action state that's going to help me keep pushing forward? So you might be repeating this process time and time again as you're moving forward with that. But that's an important thing to remember. And then another great thing for setting your foundation for setting a goal is to think about SMART goals. This is kind of one of the OGs in the goal setting world, an acronym that just explains some helpful tips for setting a goal. And I think it's valuable. I think it's helpful to know. So here's how it works. Whenever you're setting a goal, we want to be specific. Not just, I want to get in shape. What does that mean? Do you want to lose weight? Do you want to improve your 1 rep max on the bench press? Do you want to beat your personal best time from running a mile? What does that mean? Be very specific about what you want. Next, and this usually goes hand in hand, the S&M, is make sure it's measurable. Both specific, but it's also measurable. So yeah, I want to lose weight, and I want to lose exactly this amount of pounds, or I want to increase my max squat by exactly this much. Or, business wise, it's like, I want to try and get our revenues up by this much, or I want to, in our sales department, I want to improve the amount of phone calls we're making every week by this much. Make sure it's measurable. And then make sure it's also achievable. So I'm all for stretch goals. Okay. I'm all for goals that are challenging, and actually challenging goals have been proven to increase motivation. So actually having a goal that's a little outside your comfort zone is shown to be very helpful. However, make sure it is achievable, that it's something you realistically think you can achieve. Because if you really don't think that's achievable, or along the way, you're just like, this just isn't realistic for me, then of course that's not going to be helpful. The next is the R, is relevant. Is this relevant for my life? So if you want to improve your max squat in the gym, it's like, that's great. But if you say, I want to lift, I don't know, I want to make like a 200-300% increase, are you going to be an Olympic weightlifter? That's not relevant to your life. So once again, make sure that whatever that goal is setting does resonate with your values. Organizationally, maybe resonates with what you have to achieve, what will actually improve in performance or the quality of your workplace. Wherever that is, make sure it really is relevant. Companies get in this trap all the time where they set these goals that go direct, they don't even realize they go directly against their mission, vision, and values. And then they have employees questioning, like, why are we doing this? Seriously, like, why are we doing this? It's, if you think back to some of the issues that happened with Martha Stewart's corporation, right? Where they were all of a sudden using child labor when one of their values is family. Like, if some employee understood that, they would have flagged that and waved their hand and said, excuse me, why are we doing this to save a few bucks here or there? Like, this does not make sense with who we are. And even on an ethical level. But once again, is this relevant to who I am? Is this relevant to who our company is? And then time bound is set a time for yourself. If you have to adjust it later, great, but set a time and take that time seriously. So, in 1 year, I want to do this, right? And some of you future oriented thinkers or people who are planners will struggle with this, because you'll be constantly fighting this urge to want to think ahead and maybe I need to readjust. Set it, take it seriously, and then kind of put that side of your brain on the shelf for a second and realize that I can always readjust the time later, but set a real time that you take seriously so it creates a sense of urgency on the goal. So setting a good foundation, understanding the who and the why, your readiness for change. How ready are you for this change? Do you perceive the pros as outweighing the cons? And SMART goals. All these tips and tools will help you significantly when you're starting a new goal to set a good foundation. Once we've done that, where do we want to go from there? Well, I talked about the personalized process when it comes to goal setting. Self-awareness is so powerful. It's one of the greatest advantages a leader or a person can have. And all of us are very different. So you will have certain characteristics that help you with goal setting and hinder you with goal setting. And it won't be the same with everyone. So there's a personality diagnostic I like to use in a lot of the work I do. And this is just a tool for dialogue, not diagnosis. But it will at least help give you some ideas to get the wheel spinning. There's so much more that make up who each of you are. But what I like to use is DISC. Maybe you've heard of it. And it's just a great, simple tool for understanding workplace behaviors, but also how it affects your process of goal setting. And an easy way to identify yourself or someone you know is asking two simple questions. The first is the vertical axis there, is whether it be yourself or someone else on a scale of fast-paced and outspoken to cautious and reflective, where would you be? I know you could be in the middle, but if you had to pick one, fate of the world, you have to pick one of them. Even 51%, which one would it be? Fast-paced and outspoken, those people are bold, they're enthusiastic, they're forthcoming with their opinions, they're energetic. They just energize a room when they get in there. Cautious and reflective, they're a little more moderate paced, more pondering, very thoughtful and considerate, insightful. Where would you be? Once you answer that question, the next scale is the horizontal one. On a scale of questioning and skeptical to accepting and warm, where would you be? Once again, fate of the world, you have to pick one. Questioning and skeptical is those people are openly critical. They're very open with their opinions. They usually see the flaws in things. That might sound negative. It's a good thing. The world needs people like that. Okay. So I am one of those people, by the way. So questioning and skeptical, they're not easily enthused about things. They ask a lot of questions. They might openly challenge people or like to debate. Accepting and warm, those people are naturally collaborative. They're very encouraging, very optimistic, maybe sometimes too optimistic. But once again, the world needs people like that. They're very sociable and connecting. So on a scale of questioning and skeptical, accepting and warm, once you have the answer to those two questions, you can break it down into the basic 4 types. We see a fast-paced, outspoken person and questioning and skeptical. That would be a D style or dominance. Fast-paced and outspoken, accepting and warm, that would be an I style influence. Accepting and warm, cautious and reflective, that would be an S or a steadiness style. And then the final one is if you are cautious and reflective, questioning and skeptical, that would be a C or a conscientiousness style. Now, I realize this is quick, and with those 2 questions, some of you might still be trying to figure out where you lie. I'm going to break it down even further so that hopefully you'll have a good idea. And some of you could be a combination of 2 letters. But let's break down each style, especially as it relates to goal setting. So D, dominant styles. These people are very action-oriented, take charge type of people. Because of this, we often see them in leadership positions in organizations. Some of their strengths would be they're very decisive. They're good at taking quick action, pushing for results. They're comfortable with risk-taking, and they openly challenge themselves and others. So those are going to be their strengths when it comes to goal setting. Some of their challenges will be sometimes impatience, unrealistic expectations, and impulsiveness. So they're very motivated, driven people, but sometimes they might push for results too quickly, and there won't be a sustainable environment, especially when it comes to organizational contexts, because other people who aren't that style might not move as quickly as they do, or might not be as much of a risk taker as they are. So then A D style in their excitement could push for a result and fool themselves into thinking we have sustainable change when it's really not there. So, and impatience along the way of trying to cut corners sometimes instead of doing the thorough work to make sure that we have lasting change and success. I styles is they will be very creative, very enthusiastic and enterprising. They're good at starting projects and they embrace change. They're also very sociable people. They're usually the fun ones, the ones you want planning your socials or your gatherings. So they're very entrepreneurial in spirit. So those are going to be some of their strengths when it comes to setting a goal. They'll have some similar challenges to a D style in being impulsive sometimes, but also could get distracted or bored easily and lack follow through. So they're great at starting things. They're comfortable with change. So I styles, where some styles might even have trouble choosing something or starting something because we don't like change, I styles will be much better at that. They're comfortable and sometimes they crave change almost. It's like this environment has gotten too stagnant. It's gotten too boring. Let's change it up. Let's do something different. But then staying aligned to that could be challenging for them because they just get bored. They have a great energy and drive, but if they're just not interested anymore, then it's like, I don't know. Or staying structured and having follow through on stuff. S, or steadiness styles. These are very loyal people. They love keeping harmony in the workplace. They're very dependable and very steady going people, like the name says. They are often the big supporters in a group. Some strengths for them is they will be patient, they'll be realistic, they're humble, and they're consistent. So the challenges, though, are sometimes a lack of urgency, might get overwhelmed easily, and fear of change and instability. So an S style, if they're able to start a goal well, then they'll be good at staying consistent. If they, especially on the behaviors that promote that goal. But in areas of conflict, rapid change, that sort of thing could derail them if they haven't built up good emotional regulation for themselves. And then finally, a C style, they're the planners, they're the organizers, they're good admin people. They usually find themselves in finance positions if it comes to managing money, but they're very detail oriented, very thorough, very precise. So as you can imagine, that has some advantages with setting goals, like being insightful, good planners, good problem solving. They're thorough, they're disciplined, so they will set a really good plan of action when it comes to their goal. However, they might also have a bit of a lack of urgency at times, and they might get caught in overanalyzing or perfectionism or fear of change. And so it might take them a lot of motivation to even start a goal because they want to understand, okay, what are all the problems? What are all the contingencies I have to plan, right, in order to make this happen? And sometimes they might talk themselves out of a goal, where sometimes what can help a conscientiousness style is just do it. Just start something and trust your ability to learn and adapt. You don't need to have a plan ahead of time for everything. That's me. I'm speaking to myself there. But it's if a C style is able to get over that, they will have incredible ability to follow through and create lasting change. So there is no right or wrong style when it comes to goal setting. Everyone has their strengths and their unique challenges. But as I explain those, it helps you understand a little more what's going to help me when it comes to setting goals and what do I need to work on. If you're in an organization on a team, can I find some people who balance me out in the areas I'm not good in? So maybe you're an I style who's very enterprising, very entrepreneurial, you love making change. Find a C style to partner with. Once you got the idea running, it's like, hey, I can champion this, I can get people bought in, but I need you to help create some structure so we stay following through on this, right? Or if you're a D style, right, find an S style to keep you patient and keep you considering the people around you, right, in the organization of like, hey, I'm going to want to push through, and I need someone to help me stay patient and always, remember that we're trying to create something sustainable. It's not just about the end result, but how do we get there as well is important. So, and even on a personal level, if you have friends who you know are a personality that balances yours out well, maybe ask them to be that accountability that we talked about earlier. Or you have a mentor who's a certain personality that would balance you out well. The key is to surround yourself with good people who think differently than you do and have different strengths. And then also, like I said, as I was going through these, build that self-awareness. Know that, okay, I have this goal. These are some things that might prevent me, right? Maybe I'm afraid of change. Maybe I just need to get more confident and make a decision. Maybe I get going too fast and I need to find ways to keep myself interested. Those are all going to be really valuable for understanding the process of goal setting. So another time for the chat is, how have you seen your personality affect the way you approach goal setting? How have you seen it play out in your life? And I know I threw a lot at you, so if you understand it in a disc context right now, great. If not, then just in general, what you've witnessed. So setting goals that are too big, I'm guessing. I think there's a typo there. It needs to be perfect, right? So it is not done until it's right. Yep. So many ideas and just getting distracted by competing priorities. Absolutely. So we're seeing some archetypes coming out here. But these are some of the things I hear from lots of different leaders. Let me hear a couple other ones. People thinking. I can see I got people deep in thought right now. Those are some great ones that people posted. So hopefully that gave you some good things to think about when it comes to your personality. Like I said, I know that was fast, but hopefully you were able to at least narrow yourself down in the ballpark and kind of see how personalities can affect goals and some strategies for better positioning yourself for success that way. So the last section I want to get to, as I mentioned, I wanted to debunk some common myths. So what I'm about to say is that the tips and strategies I'm about to give you are not the only ones. They're not the only way to do things, but my heart today was to present you with some stuff that's a little different than what you might have typically been told and get you thinking differently. I understand that a lot of time there's two sides to every coin with some of these, but let me just suggest some things to you, put some stuff out there for you to chew on. And I imagine in at least one of these, you'll be able to find some useful information for goal setting, if not many of them. So, common myth, it's all about discipline, mind over matter, right? If you just get yourself hyped up enough, if you're not following through on your goal, it must be because you're not motivated enough or not disciplined enough, right? So here's an interesting thing to you, is that rather than that, let's change your environment. Let's think about it being the stack. Who doesn't like a good stack of pancakes? Unless you're gluten-free, then I understand that. But I show that because I want you to think about this process of stacking your goals and routines together. Thinking about promoting behaviors when it comes to your goals, the when, the where, and the how. This is where we're getting more into the practical side of things. And the idea is, how can you change your environment or implement that goal into an already existing routine you have? So let me give you a picture. Let's say you want to drink water more. Well, change your environment. Fill up the glass of water as part of your night routine that you already have. Set it next to your bed so that when you wake up, it's there. You want to run more. Go to sleep in your running gear. So when you wake up, then all of a sudden you're more positioned. Instead of thinking of how do you discipline yourself more, how do you actually make it easier? Research has shown that if you change your environment or if you implement it into something you already do, you're way more likely to remember it and for it to become a habit. So when you're thinking of goals, how do you especially think about the promoting behaviors? So once again, you might have a bigger overarching goal for maybe your organization or your life that it's not so easy to just implement it into something. But once you break it into the smaller steps, some of those you probably can. And that's where you want to think of, instead of how do I get myself more motivated, how do you actually make it easier? How do you shift your environment? The when, the where, and the how. What routines do you already have that are working well for you? If you have a really solid morning routine, if you have a really solid night routine, if you have a really solid meeting structure in place in your organization, then instead of trying to reinvent the wheel, put a new thing you want to do into one of those already. Have it, maybe tail off on the end of one of those. How can you think about it that way? How can you already implement it or absorb it into something you already do and stack them, so to speak, because that will help your brain with memory. It will help with habit forming, and it will make motivation a lot easier, because in your brain, there will be less perceived barriers. And that goes back to the pros and cons. So that's where, like I said, a lot of times I see people just wanting to try harder. And it comes back to a lot of the hustle and grind mentality. And I'm not saying that's not important. Yeah, you got to be disciplined and realize some things will be uncomfortable. Once again, though, move the goalposts. It doesn't always have to be that way. And if you're going to discipline yourself, or if you want to try hard at something, make sure it's something that you actually have to try hard on, rather than what parts of this goal can I make easier for my and be perceived as easier in my brain. So that's a different way I'd like to get you thinking about it, is not just how can I change myself, but how can I change my environment so it works for me rather than against me. Give you guys a second to take that in. I see notes happening. Next thing, I'm in control. I know what I can achieve. So the one thing I want to ask you is, when you're setting a goal, what can you actually control? What things do you have direct control over, and what things do you only have influence over? Focus on the promoting behaviors above the outcomes. So an example for this, and maybe some of you have heard this common one, is maybe you're in a sales department and you have a goal of, I want to make X amount of money this year, or I want to close X amount of sales. The truth is, you can't control that. I don't care if you're the best salesman who ever lived, you cannot control what other people will do, what buying decisions they will do. You can influence it. Your persuasive communication, your knowledge of the product, all that can influence it. But when you're setting goals, focus on what you absolutely can control. And what that salesman can control is how many calls or meetings he makes. And we know that as a promoting behavior, the more you do that, the more likely you are to have success. So in other words, set a goal of, I will make X amount of calls every week, knowing that that is going to get me closer to what I want. And there might be some times where you still have that goal, right? I want to make X amount of money, but focus really on, what do I have direct control over? What kinds of promoting behaviors can I do all the time? So I can make the calls. I can make sure I'm reviewing material on our products once a week, so I have a solid knowledge of them. What kinds of things is within your scope of control, and then understand what's in your influence. And so it's, once again, self-confidence, great. Just understand that a lot of times doing the right things will be much more powerful than trying to force an outcome, especially if it's one that you don't have full influence over. Next thing, just think positively. Don't focus on the negatives. So research has actually shown that considering the negatives and challenges you face helps motivation. Why? Well, it's the old adage, the devil you know is better than the devil you don't, right? The one thing we hate more than obstacles as human beings is uncertainty. So if you have a big goal you're pursuing, and maybe there's a lot of perceived challenges, maybe it's scary thinking of this change, a simple thing I could ask you is, what's the worst that can happen? And seriously, consider what the worst is. And if you're all right with that and you're able to prepare for that, that will be a huge boost for motivation, because you know anything else before that, I can handle. So consider the challenges and obstacles. Don't be pessimistic, but even thinking, going back to the pros and cons, like genuinely consider what stands in my way. How can I plan contingencies? Am I okay with this cost or some of these obstacles, if they might happen or not? That actually is proven to help your motivation. So, rather than just thinking positively, because that uncertainty will be in the back of your head nonetheless. It's going to come up. And then all of a sudden, when an obstacle does come up that you weren't thinking about because you were thinking positively, it will hit you it'll hit like a truck much harder. And then you have to reconceptualize that in the moment. But once again, what does stand in my way? It's okay to think about that. You don't need to give too much thought to that. And I'd also say think about the pros more, right, than the cons, but certainly don't not think about the cons. Next thing, don't box yourself in, give yourself options. So once again, research has shown that in general, the amount of big overarching goals you want to have at any given time are around 2 to 3. Your success drops significantly after 3. So what I tell people is to consider, what are you saying no to in order to say yes? What's the opportunity cost, and how do I avoid goal competition? And so maybe you have a lot of things you want to achieve, especially the I and D styles might struggle with this, is pick the 2 or 3 you're going to prioritize. I'd even say 2 that you're going to prioritize, and be ready to understand, what am I saying no to in this season in order to say yes? What am I really saying no to, so that I can give space for the behaviors, the habits, the work that needs to be done in order to get me here? And if you're okay with that, it will create a better sense of urgency. It will stop distractions from getting in the way. And it will feel less difficult, because you already know ahead of time, well, I knew I was going to have less free time on the weekends. And I decided that for myself, and I was okay with it. Instead of always having to fight that, oh man, I wish I was out with my friends right now, right? Maybe you had a goal of writing that book you finally want to write. And it's like, well, with my work schedule, I need to devote a good amount of time on the weekends. Settle that for yourself, that you're all right with that. Maybe you had a whole bunch of goals, right? Settle for yourself that I'm all right with these 2 or these 3 or even this 1 right now. And I'm okay with letting these other ones stay. And in the end, that extra productivity you will have will pay you back. The time you'll save, the extra productivity, and you're more likely to just succeed at your goals in general. So it's okay to say no for a few things. It's okay to set some boundaries in your life, in your organization, for the sake of pursuing a few priorities that matter. And then the final thing is, you've got to have your 1, 3, 5, insert any number you want in there. You've got to have those plans. I'm not against those. I'm not against the 1, 3, 5-year goals. But once again, here's a different way to look at it. So a lot of what we know about motivation and goal setting, a lot of that research was actually pioneered in the military, in the Navy, especially Navy SEALs. Because as you might understand, like, their training is brutal. It is some of the most grueling things a human can endure, right? So they invested a lot of money in their psychology departments of understanding, why do certain really athletic, physically capable specimens not make it through our training, where this, skinny little kid from Iowa was able to, right? What is going on in their brains that is affecting this? And what they found, one of the biggest insights they found, is that people who are able to be very present and who didn't focus on big overarching goals, but what they now call micro goals, saw a very high degree of success in being able to push through the training, in the sense of, not I will make it through the physical training, which is 3 months long, or whatever number, but I will make it through this morning. I will make it through this morning. They were people who were really good at setting those kind of goals and constantly doing it. Now, I'm not saying you always have to do it that way, but like I said, once again, just a different way to think about it. How can you break down those larger goals into smaller goals? How can you practice staying very present? Even some other practical tips, making things like journaling, things like meditation really help train your brain to stay in a very present state. Because sometimes what affects our motivation and causes burnout or overwhelm is the constant rumination of all the problems that could happen in the future, all the other boxes you still have to check off. It really affects the motivation centers in your brain, especially dopamine, which is the motivation hormone. A lot of people think it's the pleasure hormone. It's not. It's the motivation hormone that causes us to pursue something. It really affects how your brain perceives time. So it's important that we train ourselves to be really present in the moment, because the longer your brain perceives something happening, like, oh, this is a good goal, but I won't receive the reward until this far out, the more difficult it's going to be to access those dopamine centers in your brain and stay motivated on something, which is why small wins and training yourself just to like the work in general, which seems weird, right? Like I don't want to like running. I want to like the results of running, right? But the more you can, and this is internal dialogue that happens. These are some of these exercises you can do in a journal to reframe your thoughts. The more you can train yourself to set smaller goals, value the small wins, and just enjoy the work in general. Like, yeah, this doesn't feel comfortable, but I like doing this because I know I am getting better. That will start to shift the way your brain perceives things. And then once again, it will get excited from the small wins more than waiting for a big win months down the road. So that's another way to think about it, to not to hack, because that's how your brain is meant to function anyways, but to leverage how your brain works. So those are, once again, some different ways to think about goal setting. They're not the be all end all. They are not the only way, but I hope they were different. I hope they gave you some things that you might not have heard before. To wrap things up and to come back to those 2 steps I mentioned at the very beginning, I want to leave you guys with some homework, so to speak. Just to remind you that you're 42% more likely to achieve your goals if you write them down. And this number increases if you share it with a friend. So 2 things you can do. There's lots of things you can do based on the tools I gave you, but if nothing else, commit to writing down a goal with actionable steps. What's one goal you have, personally, professionally, whatever you want, and then break it down into some smaller chunks. Share this goal with a mentor, a friend, someone you trust, and then I'd also say set up some regular accountability, even if it's like every couple weeks, a month. And if you stay on that, you're doing better than 80-something% of people out there. And then you can start to leverage some of the tools and the strategies that we talked about today. Understanding your personality, being able to leverage some of those different mindsets when it comes to goal setting your good foundation with SMART goals, with your change readiness, the who and the why. All those will help you along the way. But I'd definitely say these 2 steps here are a good starting point for some homework. So that being said, we do have some time for questions. So I'll open the chat, and any questions you kind of have based on the stuff we went over today, based on goal setting, I'd be happy to answer that. I know we've got a little bit of time, so. And I guess, I don't know, Alana, how you want to run it. I guess we could do the chat, or someone could unmute themselves depending on how you want to do it.
Yeah, if it's easier for you guys to just speak out and unmute yourself, that's probably better than writing it out.
Whichever works for people.
Okay, I'm going to be bold here and take the first step.
All right.
I'm relatively new to this role, which obviously is a sales role, customer service role. But in my previous life, I was 30 years in the media, 21 years totally commission sales at the TV station. It's hard to this was a great presentation, Ryan. Thank you so very much for sharing it. It absolutely touched on all the buttons. And I must admit, it's a little bit of a challenge for me with my past to not, what's the right word? I don't even know, diminish what you shared, because I absolutely, every single thing that you shared was valuable. It's, I just have to search inward to myself and keep it fresh. That's what I struggle with, because, I mean, I've had hundreds of these kinds of things. And so I have to, that's my personal struggle right now, is to, how do I keep it fresh, and and I love the disc. It's a great, there's also one with colors, but it's a very insightful method of kind of learning who you are yourself. So thank you very much for sharing everything that you did, because it is helpful to me. It kind of helps me ground again.
Thank you, Brenda. And to your point, like how many workshops have we seen on this kind of stuff? How much do we see out there? That was part of the reason why I wanted to help give you guys tools to make it personal, to start thinking about it in a different way, and then use some of these to like, what is Brenda's process for goal setting, right? And I encourage people, like, make use of what worked for you in this workshop, and anything that didn't, just toss it on the shelf. It's completely okay. And I saw a chat here. Oh, thank you, Sherman. Yeah, DISC can be very helpful for personal attributes. And even those 2 questions can be a great tool for just what we call people reading, not profiling per se, but starting to understand a better way to interact with people, whether it be clients, customers, but especially understanding yourself. And you might have saw some personal stories of goals as it kind of pertains to the different styles. I see another chat here. So Matt said, sometimes goals fall short because of them needing to involve others with different personalities and communication styles. How do you get buy-in on your ideas when this happens? Yes, absolutely. Because not all of you will be in the full position of authority, right? Where you could just tell a department or a team, this is what needs to happen. One of the biggest things I say, in order for buy-in to happen, there needs to be weigh-in. And that, for some styles, can be hard. For a lot of people, can be hard because it takes patience. You need to let people fully communicate their disagreement, their concerns, their fears, their ideas, and make sure everyone feels completely heard in the process. So that's the first step of realizing that in order for there to be buy-in, there needs to be weigh-in. And then there needs to be clarity, in the sense of, once we finally start agreeing on things, and I'd really encourage that if it's more of a peer-to-peer environment, that you get people's cooperation on things, where you gauge the team. Okay, guys, are we all agreeing to this as a step, right? Are we all agreeing to this? If so, then at the end, we're clearly articulating that of, okay, these are the steps we're doing, and decide who is owning what. That's a big thing I find where teams fall short, is they don't define ownership. So you might have an overarching goal with a few different steps, and no one, people are kind of like, well, I guess I'll do that. I guess I'll do this. But like at the end of team meetings, it's like, okay, guys, just so we got this clear, Brenda is owning this, Matt is owning this, and these are the deadlines for those things. Is that correct? Right? So those steps I found really help. And then from there, just communication, building trust, holding each other accountable on that, and understanding with a group of people, it will take a little longer. But I'd say a couple things to help you right off the bat: weigh in and clarity, like, and especially defining ownership over what tasks we're going to do. Any other questions? I think we still got a few minutes here. So, well, actually, we're pretty close. So I want to honor time with people. So those were some great questions. Once again, just to kind of wrap things up. So you can see my contact info there. If you have any questions about the kind of stuff we went over today, feel free to shoot me an email. I'd be happy to answer any questions on goal setting. Or if you are working with an organization and you have kind of questions about leadership coaching, team workshops, anything in that sort of area. I do go over goal setting, productivity, leadership, especially communication and teamwork and conflict resolution. I do a lot on those topics. So if you see some areas where that could benefit some leaders, yourself, your team, let's have a conversation about it. I'd be happy to talk more. And with that said, I'll pass it back off to Alana.
Thanks so much for your time, Ryan. So this was great. I hope that everyone is writing down their 2023 goals. So this session is being recorded. So all of this information is going to be available on our YouTube channel. So you can refer back to it. Ryan's contact information, obviously on this slide, will be available in the recording. Or you can just reach out to me and I can provide you with it. So thank you for sitting in on today's session. This is actually our last workshop of the year. So I hope that everybody has a wonderful holiday season and a very happy new year. We're going to see you in 2023. So thanks again and have a great day.
Thanks, everyone.